The press website of the Holy and Great Council has a section which they've called the glossary, where they explain some of the terms being used and some of the names being used. And each church has a short little history attached to it. I was referencing in another of these recordings the Church of the Czech and Slovak lands. The glossary explains that the church was created in the 9th century by the missionizing work of Saints Cyril and Methodius. And it is interesting that the dates that they give are 865 to 886. Most history books give the date as 862. Now someone might argue that 862 versus 865 is a small historical inaccuracy that can be overlooked. Well, unfortunately, as I said, I argue that the church stands for truth, and the press center has to provide truthful and accurate information. In 865, the two saints were asked to visit Rome. So for the next couple years, they were in Rome. They were not doing their missionary work in the Czech and Slovak lands, which at that time were known as Moravia, Greater Moravia to be exact. And it was in Rome that Cyril died, and it was around 870 or 871 that Methodius went back to his missionary work in the lands of the Czech and Slovak peoples. And he was imprisoned by the Catholic Church because they did not want the Byzantine Church to proselytize in that area. And it was only after 873 that Methodius was able to continue his work. And he passes away in 885. And the website says that he continued to work until 886. Now, of course, you might say that these are minor historical inaccuracies, but it's these type of inaccuracies that become useful in another example that I'm going to give in promoting a completely false history. And there are political agendas hidden behind these historical inaccuracies, and it is a sad day in my mind when I see the press center for such an important event as the Holy and Great Council creating and promoting these inaccuracies, and I question why. And at the same time, I'm surprised because I always see behind all of this the hand of the Moscow Church, of the Moscow regime. And for instance, if you look at the official logo of the Church of the Czech and Slovak lands, there is a depiction of the two saints, Cyril and Methodius. Cyril is holding a scroll on which is represented the Cyrillic alphabet, which allegedly he created. But this is another historical inaccuracy. The alphabet that the two saints created, or in particular Cyril, is Glagolitic. The symbols are unrecognizable. They are not Cyrillic. But again, this is one of the myths that the Moscow Patriarchate for centuries has been promoting, because this is an idea that everything that is in the Slavic lands is somehow or other connected back to Moscow and the Russian Orthodox Church. In fact, the crosses that are depicted in this logo are the three barred crosses of the Moscow Church. Cyril and Methodius would have been traveling with a two-barred cross, which was the patriarchal cross of the Patriarch of Constantinople, and not the three-barred cross of the Moscow Patriarchate, which certainly emerges much, much later. So when I see all of these inaccuracies, I cannot help but speak up and comment and point out to people that I see at every step in this media campaign of Moscow trying to somehow massage and change our perception of history, our perception of reality. This is the kind of hybrid war that we are engaged with, and I feel I have to respond and point out all of these details that are not as detailed, are not as small as one would believe. These are very serious and important issues that have to be addressed. The Glagolitic alphabet has to be portrayed, the dates have to be correct about Cyril and Methodius, and this unfortunately is something that the press center should not be just pushing the send button, but they should have staff that are accurately reading all of this information and making sure that the world is getting the correct information. Reading the short historical blurb on the Russian Orthodox Church, I find a statement that says the Church received its autocephaly in 1448. Normally, historians refer to 1589 as the year it received its independence in the form of a patriarchate. Before 1448, the Metropolitan of Kyiv, who over the centuries had migrated to Moscow, happened to be Isidore of Kyiv. He was a pro-Union bishop who attended the Ferrara-Florence Council, at which the Orthodox Church agreed to reunite with the Catholic Church under the Pope. When Metropolitan Isidore returned to Moscow and explained what he had done, he was imprisoned, he escaped, and his metropolitanship ends in 1441. The political upheavals in the twilight years of the Byzantine Empire, especially between the pro-Union and anti-Union bishops in Constantinople, continued for the rest of the time until the fall of the city in 1453. As a matter of fact, after the fall of Constantinople, it was the Uniate Patriarch of Constantinople that re-establishes the Metropolia of Kyiv, but this time with the Metropolitan residing in Vilnius, Lithuania. And the first such Metropolitan elected in 1458 was actually elected by the Pope. And it was in 1458 that the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, who appointed in the newly reconstituted Metropolia of Kyiv, the first Metropolitan of Kyiv who resided in Lithuania. So, to make a statement that Constantinople gave Moscow its autocephaly in 1448 is not only stretching the truth, but providing false information altogether. I can see why this would benefit the interests of the Russian Orthodox Church today, because this gives them greater authority by more than 100 years. And it does not serve to promote the truth, the history, And the Orthodox Church obviously stands for truth, and we have to have historical truth as well. Otherwise, this degenerates into what is now referred to as this hybrid war, where information is twisted, where falsehoods are presented as truths. And it is sad to see that this is happening at the Sobor, at this holy and great council that will be convening in Crete in a week.